Hello everybody, I just wanted to give my thoughts on the Druid uniques that are currently in Diablo 4. First off, we have Vassal's Prayer, really solid, really good, does exactly what you want a unique to be. You want it to be game changing, you want it to be sought after. It is very much used in the pulverized build, and it is very useful. It turns your earth skills into werebear skills, so now all your earth skills can benefit from werebear multipliers, etc., and also proc werebear stuff and shapeshifting to a werebear, which I think is pretty cool. Overall, awesome. I like this item. I will be going over the downsides to the uniques after all this, but first on, we're just going to kind of go over what overall if I think that the item is good or bad. Also, on Vassal's Prayer, the secondaries kind of suck. Lightning resistance, overpower damage, and damage while shapeshifted really aren't that great because they're all additive, so not really a big fan of that, but the effect that you get from it is really good. Tempest Roar, same thing. This is great unique. It is game changing for a lot of builds. It makes it to where your storm skills grant you additional spirit, which is huge because you see a lot of people complaining currently about spirit regen and stuff like that. So this is overall pretty good. Now it also has critical strike damage on it, which is pretty useful. However, the poison, the max spirit, and the damage while shapeshifted really aren't that useful, but this is still going to be used in a ton of builds because just the actual what you're getting, what the unique item does, is just so powerful, right? So overall these are pretty good. However, they need the secondaries changed, or at least make it to where you can like re-roll the secondaries or something like that. You have Waxing Gibbous. This is pretty good. This is pretty good for shred builds. Now, I don't think it's like insane, like it's not as good as what these are, but it is still pretty good, and you will see it used in some builds. I actually have a build where I was using it inside of Grizzly Rage. It was pretty fun, but it was also alongside Tempest Roar, I believe. So yeah, but overall, pretty fun. It gives you stealth after you kill an enemy with shred, and then when you break the stealth you guarantee critical strikes for 2.2 seconds, which is a pretty sweet effect. Also, it has critical strike damage, damage to close enemies, and damage to injured enemies. So it doesn't, and it's also on an axe, so you do get the healthy enemies on it. So the secondaries aren't crazy, like they're not as bad as what like Tempest Roar and Vassal's are. The life on kill is really bad, and I mean if you could just get vulnerable damage on this would be like a really good in terms of like stat wise. If you could just throw vulnerable on it somewhere, like maybe get rid of the life on kill and turn that into vulnerable. But overall I think Waxing Gibbous isn't too bad. However, it is for shred, and it is going to be used in more niche builds as opposed to, I guess, more mainstream stuff. Then we have Great Staff of the Crone. This one's become pretty popular. Again, however, it is alongside Tempest Roar, and what this does is it makes it to your claws now a storm skill, and it casts Storm Strike at 140% additional damage. It gives you a ton of ranks to claw. Overall, this item is pretty sweet. You see it in the Stormclaw build, and I don't know, not a really crazy amount to say other than that. I think this one's actually pretty good. Well, I guess there's one thing about it that I don't like. So on the secondaries, you are again not able to get crit or vulnerable, and this is probably the main issue I have with it. Even aside from the crit and vulnerable not being able to get that, they didn't put basic skill damage on it. They might have put 8 ranks to claw on it, but they didn't put plus basic skill damage, and I feel like that just makes sense, right? Because you're giving up a two-handed legendary power ability, and you're getting essentially a 50% increase to your Storm Strike damage. And the eight ranks of claw and stuff is cool, but it's not really that much damage. Like, you're not really seeing, like, this item isn't really that crazy in terms of damage. Because like in my opinion, and this might be a hot take, the Stormclaw build's damage is actually pretty mediocre compared to other builds in terms of damage. However, it is a good build because it's survivable, it's tanky, yada yada. However, compared to other builds, I think its damage is actually lacking, and I think that's a big part why is because I think the secondaries need to be adjusted maybe a little bit on this, or maybe they could even buff the amount of Storm Strike. Like if that was up to like 300%, okay, it's like, okay, maybe we're talking here, because when you look at like 8 ranks of Claw, right, And let's just go over to the abilities here, and I'll show you, right? That seems like a lot, but look at what you're actually getting. See how it says 20% parentheses there? So if I increase this, let me take some points out of Shred here, right? If I increase this, and this is the same for Claw, I believe it's the same for Maul. I think most of these are, yeah, they're right around 20% of your weapon damage, right? And you increase it, you're getting 2% per rank up, right? So when you can see, you're putting a lot of stock into this, right? Now keep in mind, you are going to be generating spirit like mad, which is cool, right? But you're also giving up a two-handed legendary power, which is typically used to buff whatever you're going to be using your spirit spender on, right? And that's why I think the Stormclaw's damage is a little bit lower. Obviously not a bad build, pretty good, but yeah, but if you come over here, look, and you can see you have 38, 53, and the third attack is 105% of your weapon damage. So I don't know, they kind of need to do something maybe a little bit to buff this damage a little bit more. But that being said, it's still not a bad unique. It's used, definitely a used item, but that's just kind of the changes I would make. Is I would really just make the Storm Strike maybe do a little bit more damage, or even maybe make Claw do more. Maybe heck, maybe even add even more ranks to Claw, because I mean that's like what, plus 16% damage if you have a maxed out one, which really isn't all that much considering you're putting so much into it and like losing your ability to get a two-handed legendary power, which I think is really the main issue with this. It's just the fact that you have to give that up for this, right? Because yeah. Anyway, but moving right along, we have Insatiable Fury. So Werebear form is now your true form, and you gain +2 ranks to all Werebear skills. This is not bad because it keeps you in Werebear form all the time, so you have things like your % total armor in Werebear form up all the time. You also get +2 ranks to all Werebear skills, so if you're playing a Werebear build, it is going to help. You also get total armor while in Werebear form. You also get damage reduction while fortified, so the secondaries are not crazy bad on this. Now, if you're pushing super high up, you're probably not going to run this though. Because you are going to be losing like 40% damage reduction by running this, which is not really ideal. So that's going to be a recurring theme for Mad Wolf's Glee as well, because it's the same thing but just the werewolf version, but you get damage reduction from these that are poison, movement, speed, poison, damage, physical. So you're losing 3 damage reduction stats here, you're losing 2 damage reduction stats here. So overall, but however, now these are definitely usable if you're playing, you know, lower. You know, like I'm talking in terms of like hundreds here, you know, and like 80s, or like, you know, pushing high nightmare dungeon, things that most people probably aren't even going to do. So like these are very usable. Lots of people are going to use it. They're going to have fun. They're very cool uniques. I like them for sure. Moving right along to Temerity. So this is a general one that I believe most classes can use. Effects that heal you beyond 100% life grant you a barrier for up to 40 to 80%. I have a terribly rolled one. Now, one thing that I noticed about this is that it says beyond 100% life grants you a barrier for up to 44% of your maximum life that lasts for 8 seconds. It says that, but I'm not 100% certain that it actually does that. Now, I might be dead set wrong on that, but for some reason the barrier always seems lower mathematically than whenever I put it in a calculator. But that being said, this is still pretty good. It gives you a way to easily gain access to barrier, so you can then use Conceited Aspect, which is another multiplicative multiplier. But the downside of this being you lose 4 damage reduction stats, but you are getting a defensive bonus, so that kind of offsets it a little bit, but I'm still not 100% certain that losing quad damage reductions, you know, like you look at these pants, right? It's like you're losing all this damage reduction for a barrier. I'm not sure the math is going to check out on that, because if you got rid of all of these, there's probably an argument to be made that without all this damage reduction, the barrier is just going to get popped instantly when you start pushing up higher. That being said, it's still pretty good. You'll see it in builds. You know, most people aren't even going to be playing and doing 100s, so I don't really think, you know, so again, I don't really think these are too bad, but when it comes to using these much higher up, they just kind of fall off, and that's kind of a recurring issue with uniques. So next we have Storm's Companion. Your wolf companions are infused with the power of the storm, dealing lightning damage, gaining a storm howl ability. So if companions were just better, or if wolf companions were just better and did more damage, these would be really good. But the thing is that the wolf companions, once you start getting into tier 3, tier 4, mainly tier 4, tier 3, they still remain pretty relevant. But when you get into world tier 4 and you start getting up into like 80s, you know, start getting closer and closer to 100, you're going to notice that the damage isn't really there anymore. And you're also going to notice that they're going to kind of die to explosion effects a lot, especially in nightmare dungeons where you have like 4 or 5 affixes, right? Because if you're doing low nightmare dungeons, it's like whatever, they'll do fine. But if you're doing higher ones where you have like 5 affixes, yeah, they get one shot a lot. Like if you take these into Uber Lilith, God, I forget what, like, they pretty much die to like all of her abilities. So like they're not really even like, it's like they're not really useful, for example, like in Uber Lilith, because they just die so much. But that being said, if at some point werewolf companions receive a buff, or there's some change, whether it be a buff, whether it be a new unique item that gets added into the game, you know, whether it be a new skill tree that gets added to the game that buffs companions, right? It will, like, this could immediately just flip and become really good. Now again, you are losing quad damage reductions, which is another issue, but if they ever add in the legendary that I am praying they add in, that just is very simple and just says you gain a certain amount of damage reduction per active companion, it will totally make up for, it'll totally make up for that, right? Because if you can have 9 companions out, and let's say you get like 90% damage, let's say it's like 10% damage reduction per companion, or like 5% or something, and you're actually able to get like 45-50% damage reduction, it's like, okay, now we're actually starting to now we're starting to cook here a little bit, right? But you know, because I mean, you look at this, your core skills deal up to which one is it? Yeah, core skills deal like an additional 12%. I just want this, but for damage reduction. That's really all I want. If they did that, I think Storm's Companion would become much better. And then there is one here that I don't have, but it's called Hunter's Zenith, and whenever you use a werewolf ability, it makes your next werebear ability have no cooldown and cost no resource, and then whenever you use a werebear ability, it makes your next werewolf ability heal you. So yeah, keep that in mind. That one's actually, I need to go out and find one. I found a billion of them and I accidentally scrapped all of them, so I haven't been able, and and naturally once I actually want it to test things, I can't find a single one after finding like legit, I think I found like 15 of those things, and I scrapped them all like a total idiot. So, but that's okay. So, but that one's pretty cool because it'll do things like keep your debilitating roar up like permanently. So like I am interested in looking at that one for, in terms of like a damage reduction thing, because I think that again is another one. And I think that's kind of the recurring theme to all these, is that every single unique that a druid has is usable at some level of play, which is cool, right? However, you're going to see them kind of fall off though once you get to the higher. So like this, I would say these, pretty much just all of these. The main issue I have with uniques right now is that when it's on a chest piece or legs, you lose so much damage reduction for what you gain that these become unusable at higher levels. And that's kind of my main issue with uniques, is that they need to just buff the secondaries. They need to make it to where you can reroll the secondaries, make it, or maybe even make it to where they don't even have set in stone secondaries, right? Like if they just had that effect on it and it didn't have set in stone secondaries, I would actually be way happier with these, because then you could at least eventually get a unique that has like perfect stats. Now there's gonna be a lot of people that don't like that, because obviously it's gonna have to require you to farm more and stuff like that, but I do think that would be like the easiest fix for uniques, would just be make it to where they don't have these static secondaries. So like, yes, because it's like these, I mean, these secondaries right here aren't even that great as it is, so it's like, who cares if they can roll even worse, right? Because then at least you have the chance for them to roll even better. High risk, high reward. Then my other issue with the uniques currently is, aside from the fact they need to buff secondaries and make it to where you can actually change them, is that there's way too much reliance on these helmets for certain builds. So I think in that, but I don't necessarily know if that's a unique problem or if that indicates an underlying issue with the Druid in itself. That because there are builds you can play, right? Like for example, if you're playing a Blurred Beast Shred build, you know, you don't need any uniques. Like I don't run any uniques for this build, right? So if you're running storm stuff like Lightning Storm, you don't really need uniques. But like once you get into like Tornado, Pulverize, maybe even Landslide to some extent, all of a sudden these uniques become more and more necessary, and some of the best Druid builds that are just out there require these uniques. But then again, I don't know, I'm still in a little bit of indecision on if that's a problem, because isn't that what you want a unique to be? It's like maybe they should just, maybe the answer is to leave these two the same, and maybe the real issue is that the rest of these are actually just too weak, right? So I don't know. But anyway, that's really my thoughts on uniques. So just go ahead, let me know in the comments what you guys think. But that's going to be it for this video. Like, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you next time.